Hi, shalom friends. You know, many people get many questions posed to them in their lifetime. All of us have been asked probably about, so what do you think the weather will be? Or how do I get from point A to point B? And of course, if you're a professional, you get professional questions. If you're a doctor, you get questions about health. If you're a lawyer, questions about how to deal with how to write a will or whatever. Well, rabbis also, of course, get rabbinic questions, and one of those questions that inevitably comes up is, Rabbi, how do I get forgiven for my sins? What should I do? There's a lot of things that I regret having done in my lifetime, and is there a formula? And of course, there is a formula. The formula is God is infinitely gracious and benevolent and compassionate. So essentially, you have to express to God, not to any human being. You say to God, I regret what I did, and I will endeavor never to do it again, and please forgive me. And you could rest assured that God will forgive you. And of course, depending on your levels of sincerity, that's commensurate with the proportion of God's forgiveness. So we know the formula, and yet there's a story told about a great Hasidic leader where one of his finest students said, Rabbi, I know what to do, and I've even done it, and yet I still don't feel cleansed. Can you give me a mystical insight into what more can I do to make it as if my sin is non-existent? The Rabbi looked at him and thought for a moment. He says, actually, I can give you some advice. If you will go to this and this village and make the acquaintance of Yitzchak, I am sure the answer to your question will become revealed to you. And he told them the name of the village, and please don't forget to go to Yitzchak. Well, this chassid of the great Rabbi traveled to the village and was surprised. He thought that it would be a large village with a large Jewish community, but instead actually found out that there were very few Jews living in this village. And when he asked around, does anyone know Yitzchak? They said, yeah, Yitzchak lives at the outskirts of this village, and he has a large home which doubles up as an inn. So when people are coming from their journeys, he provides lodging. He provides some refreshments. There's a place in the back for the horses to be uncoupled where they're able to, rest and eat the hay and so on. So this was not what he had expected. He had expected a Rabbi Yitzchak, who was probably a great teacher of Torah, or at the very least, a very pious individual that would spend hours and hours in prayer. People like this would know how to make sin non-existent, but a person who works with horses and with Gentiles and with Jews, but the Rebbe said, make sure you get to know him. So he walked to the inn, and it was nothing more than a large room. There were people eating, people drinking. There was one guy sleeping in the corner. There was a lot of cigarette smoke, and he saw a Jew whose name was Yitzchak running around taking orders and in general keeping the place humming. So he just took a seat and observed him for an hour or two, and he could not observe anything about him. I mean, he was wearing a head covering, but that's about it. He didn't see him say any prayers. He didn't see him do any special acts of kindness. So he figured, well, maybe it's a little bit later he reveals himself. In the meantime, Yitzchak went over to him and said, is there anything I can do for you? He bought himself a cup of tea. And he said, no, I hope you don't mind. I'm just going to stay here and rest up. He said, fine. Anyway, the day passed. It was a busy day. And towards evening, Yitzchak shepherds the people out, some gently, some forcibly. And the rabbi, the chassid, is looking and observing and trying to glean from the actions some deeper meaning, and could not get anything out of this. He was just a simple innkeeper. There was just one thing that was a bit odd, though, because every once in a while, in middle of the day, Yitzchak would go to the counter, take out a big book, and write something in the book. In the beginning, he thought perhaps it was a ledger, writing down what people owe him, but he realized that it wasn't that at all, because there seemed to be a different book used for that. So he was curious, what did he write in that ledger? But he didn't have a chance to ask until the last of the guests were asked to leave, and then Yitzchak says to this rabbi, he says, look, I don't know what you really want from me. You bought a cup of tea. We don't have overnight lodgings, so what exactly are you here for? So he said, I'll tell you the truth. I'm here to get to know you. Yitzchak said, there's nothing to know. What you see is what you get. What you get is what you see. I'm just a simple guy. You got to be kidding. Why did you come here? He says, well, my Rabbi sent me. What for? He said, I would be able to learn from you how to get rid of sin. He says, listen here. It sounds very complicated, something like that. You should go to a great rabbi who's an expert in these things. I don't know anything. So he says, haven't you ever been bothered by it? He says, me? No, I've never been bothered by it at all. Why should I be? And the chassid thinks, maybe I'm supposed to inspire him to do teshuvah. He says, look, you were busy a whole day, but how many times during the day did you get a chance to make a blessing or to say a prayer? As a matter of fact, I don't think I saw you more than, say, 3 minutes the afternoon prayer. That's very quick. How much intention can you have had? I mean, how do you spend the day so ordinary? I mean, there were some sins that you must have committed. It doesn't bother you? The innkeeper looks at him and says, actually it does, but not for long. So he says, okay, can you tell me what you've been writing down? And Yitzchak's face reddens, and he's a bit embarrassed, and he says, ordinarily I would not continue this conversation at all. But because your rabbi sent you to me, I suppose I'm supposed to disclose a little bit about it. Come, I'll show you. And he takes him behind the counter, takes out this big ledger, and he sees on the top of the page is the day, and he sees a couple of notations. 11:02, I forgot to make a blessing. 12:07, I got angry. 3:09, I cursed. And he saw that there was a list of maybe 12, 13 things that had happened during the day that were not very nice. And they were written down. The chassid looks at Yitzchak and he says, wow, what do you do? He says, well, I don't go to bed until God forgives me. He said, but how do you know? He says, well, later on, before going to bed, I'm going to read this page, and I'm going to think about it, and it never fails. I begin to cry and regret. And my tears fall on the page. And after I cry, if the writing is still legible, then I know I didn't do enough teshuvah. But if it becomes illegible, in fact, if it's erased, then I know God has forgiven me. Well, this chassid had never seen such simplicity or truth. Thanked him for the lesson and left. And that's the end of the story. When he asked the Rabbi, I know what to do. You have to regret and this and that, but I still don't feel cleansed. He sent him to an innkeeper. The way it becomes cleansed is if you can't read anymore the sin. If you're not anymore aware of the sin. You can't remember what the sin looked like because you cried. Or you did the equivalent of crying. That's the level of tshuva. But when a person says, oh, I have sinned, oh Lord, I'm so sorry, please forgive me. If it's done with sincerity, there's forgiveness. But that's not complete forgiveness because it wasn't a complete atonement. Now, this story I've read many times, And the lesson that I'm sharing with you is a lesson that I think is what the main story is about. But I have to tell you, as you grow older, you become a little more mature, and you think about it in a different way. And it occurred to me that the lesson of the story is not the tears at all. It seems to me what the Rabbi wanted to show his student was not how to undo sin, but the process. I want to ask you a question. What do we write down? Like, speaking for myself, if I have many things to do during the day, I will often write down things that I should be doing, just to remind myself. I think in almost every house in America, there might be something hanging on the refrigerator, some handwritten note that reminds you what to do. Things that are not so important, you don't write down. So now I have a question for you. If I did something wrong today, would I really want to remember that I did something wrong? I would prefer to think that I'm a pretty good person, I'm a pretty nice guy, I'm a pretty spiritual individual, and I got angry, didn't make a blessing, this, that, I had gossiped. Who remembers? I don't even remember it. It was such a busy day. It was by and large a good day, a holy day, a day of spiritual growth. You see, but this innkeeper understood that if you don't take an inventory and you don't remember, you don't remind yourself of where you could improve, you never will improve. Every single day you'll be saying the same thing. I didn't do anything major wrong, so I guess I'm okay. And you'll live your life like that. I'm a pretty nice guy. I never really murdered, and I never really mugged, and I never really, did some type of terrible sin. I never ate pork, so I guess I'm okay. What the Rebbe sent him was not only to learn that to undo sin, you have to make it illegible. Rabbi wanted to show him that to undo sin, sin has to matter to you. You have to remember that something not good happened or something that not right happened. When you're aware and it bothers you enough to remember it by writing down, you're already more than halfway there on your path to repentance. So friends, we have what to do. We're all good, but to the measure of good is always better. And there are many levels of forgiveness, many levels of regret. The smallest is valuable, but a deeper might open up a new vista. I wish you all a happy and a healthy and a sin-free year. Shalom.